Hi, everyone, and welcome to Connect 4. Tonight, we're talking to Tracey Kimberley, and I had the opportunity of meeting Tracey and her daughter several years ago at Low Carb Denver. We actually had an odd meeting in a hot tub. That's where we met. So I think it was all over, and we were just hanging out, and we were in the hot tubs, and that's when I actually formally was introduced to you. And so along from there, I really followed your journey and followed your journey with your family on social media, and you have a big family as well. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that and how you just look at food. But tell us a little bit about yourself, Tracey, and maybe a little bit about your family.
Okay, well, I'm Tracey Kimberley, and I'm in Australia. You might be able to tell by the great accent. So at the moment, it's evening for you. For me, it's 8:39 in the morning, and I've just got my four children all off to school. So it's been a little bit chaotic, but you know what school morning isn't. So I grew up in Brisbane, Australia. I now live in Canberra, which is the capital city of Australia. That's where Parliament House is and lots of different things. So Canberra, it's winter here at the moment. So in my hoodie, and it's about, well, it was -1 degree Celsius this morning when I got up. So it's a bit fresh. 5 years ago, almost, it'll be a month from now, my eldest daughter Ashley, was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, and I knew absolutely nothing at that point in time. I think my children had only ever been to the doctor when they got their early childhood vaccinations, and that was it. I'd never had to go to doctors, specialists, or anything. And then all of a sudden, my daughter was laying in hospital dying from DKA, diabetes ketoacidosis. And a whole new world just emerged open. All I ever wanted to be was mum. I was quite happy. My husband was in the army. We moved around a bit. I was just happy being a mum and raising my children on bases, and just being a mum of four.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, I had to learn all this new terminology. I had to learn. I didn't even know what an endocrinologist was. I've never heard of the word before in my life. And
Yeah.
then here's a man standing in front of me telling me he's an endocrinologist and that he's going to share my daughter with me. And like, and he and I didn't really have a good relationship right from word go, and we still don't. Um, but yeah, look, life took on a whole new journey. I was an athlete. I understood food. Well, I thought I understood food. And then, so 6 months prior to Ashley being diagnosed, my dad was very, very unhealthy. He wasn't very well. He realized that he had insulin resistance. He wasn't quite type 2 diabetes, but I think if he'd kept going, only in a matter of maybe a couple of months to a few weeks, he probably would have passed that threshold into type 2 diabetes. And he started watching a couple of movies on the plane, actually, coming home from visiting us in Canberra. He watched a couple of videos about sugar and exactly what that was, and called me up when he got home and said, I need to cut sugar out of my diet. And so we went down that road, and then he worked out that carbohydrates were sugar. And so I learnt low carb 6 months prior to Ashley's diagnosis through the eyes of type 2 diabetes and insulin resistance and hyperinsulinemia. So I learnt the bad parts of insulin. And then 6 months later, I'm looking at somebody dying in front of me from no insulin. So,
The two
yeah,
worlds didn't quite match up. Like they're very different.
how this made sense, and I didn't know what to make of it. I mean, here I am, just a mum who was a swimmer, and I didn't have to worry about really anything that I put in my mouth ever. And I mean, I knew about proteins, fats, and carbs. I was quite a big athlete, so I needed to understand those things to fuel my body. And I would say, well, I would have said that I was quite healthy. I was very low fat and ate 500 grams of carbs a day.
Yeah.
And they were good carbs because they were rice and pasta and potatoes. And I was very low fat. Then all of a sudden, here's this person that's very, very metabolically unwell, and here's this person, well, again, metabolically very unwell because she had no insulin and this person had too much insulin. So,
So
yeah.
when you started looking into it, all of those months ahead, did you start to kind of reassess your own family diet, or were you just looking at for your own, just for yourself at that point, and maybe for your dad, it didn't quite integrate it to the family yet?
No, they were my test dummies because, as I said, Dad lives 2 states away and I'm down here. So for people who don't know really Australia, my father's about 2.5 days drive away. Australia's quite a big country, so he's fair distance. And I started making these meals and I would experiment on my children. And funny enough, they actually loved a lot of the low carb. So one of them was cauliflower fried rice.
Mm,
That was the first one that I integrated into the family, and they absolutely loved it. I'm very fortunate that my father didn't allow us to drink things like cordial, fruit juices, soft drinks when we were growing up. So I didn't have that parameter to deal with when I was dealing with my own children. So I didn't have to cut those things out of their diets. Um, so but that was something that I worked on with dad. But as I was learning, and I also do believe, there are some genetic things, there are some predisposition things, there are some environmental epigenetic stuff. So I was sort of thinking, what can I do with my children so I can look at, their health, and I'm looking at my father's health and where we can change some things, how I can look at my own health. And as I was sort of just changing some meals, like we went back to bacon and eggs or sausages and eggs for breakfast, again, that cauliflower fried rice, I was starting to feel better myself. However, I didn't really have much time. I know it sounds 6 months sounds like a long time, but it's not really.
yeah,
From thinking that I feel well and this is feeling really good to, oh my God, my daughter's sick. So, and then that took on a whole new, that took us 3 weeks though for me to gain my confidence and understanding. But it was like literally someone hit me over the head. It took me to the point where my daughter almost actually died from a hypo state. I don't know if people understand blood glucose levels. And again, I speak in different, wait, I'll get my trusty calculator because I speak in different glucose levels. She was 1.7 times 18. She was at 30. So, she went to bed at beautiful levels. She was at that time, it was beautiful levels. She was 7.1. So that she was 127 when she went to bed, and 2 hours later, she was down at 30,
yeah.
um, which is very deadly. And I realized then that this was just not how we were going to live with diabetes in the family. So I realized that low carb, or my thought was, can I actually cut carbs out of her diet and lower that parameter? I still had no idea what insulin meant. I still had no idea what type 1 diabetes really meant. But I was thinking, what if I cut carbs down? Could that be, I know she needs insulin, but then could that be a lesser, so I'm not playing and gambling with medication?
Right.
And the following day, I actually found a video of a gentleman here in Australia that is a type 1 diabetic who went low carb a couple of years before that. And that just gave me so much hope that, yeah, I can do this.
So now, like, we're how many, well, I know how many years later, but tell our viewers, how many years now has passed since the diagnosis of Ashley's type 1 diabetes to today? And maybe talk a little bit about what gone on with the family food dynamic since through that process. Yeah,
Okay. Yep. There's a lot in there.
I know.
So we went, as I said, Ashley was diagnosed on the 25th of August 2016. 3 weeks it took, and then she was back on low carb. And since then, so that's almost 5 years now. Well, it is 5 years that we've introduced lower carb, because that was the beginning of 2016 that I started introducing or cutting some carbohydrates from our meals. But technically, keto, very low carb, August 2016, roughly, or September. Um, However, our eating dynamic has changed and ebbed and flowed and moved in those 5 years due to different things. So, beginning of last year or end of, so after we met in the end of 2018, no, 2019. Sorry, 2020 doesn't really exist
No,
because of
it doesn't.
2019 or sort of towards the September, October, I started noticing some changes in her insulin requirements and needs, and it was just not, something wasn't right. And so I took her to see, and a lot of people do know in your world as well as mine, Dr. Paul Mason, who's a metabolic specialist in Sydney. I said, could you help me? We're at Low Carb Down Under, a big event here. And I said, no one's listening to me again. That's a whole nother story. We'll talk about that a lot of time. People hate me, especially specialists. And I said, no one will listen to me again. She's on about 250 units sometimes a day. And he went, oh, even my type 2 patients are not on that amount of insulin. I said, thank you, something is wrong. And so he did a whole heap of extensive blood tests and found that she was borderline Hashimoto's, which is thyroid autoimmune. And she was also a very, very silent, but very, very bad way, celiac. Misery loves company. Unfortunately, I know it might sound like a lot to a lot of people, but a lot of people diagnosed with type 1 diabetes either started with celiac. It comes about when you've got type 1 and also Hashimoto's. They're all on that autoimmune band. Unfortunately, they're kind of linked. So we ended up going carnivore beginning of last year with her to help with those autoimmunes, help to calm things down. So yes, I have a type 1 diabetic that was on 0 carb. For many people, that's going to be a big shock. It's okay, take a deep breath. She's still alive because you're told, eat whatever you want, just cover it with insulin. It is the worst medical advice that I think is on the planet at the moment. So we're now semi-predominantly carnivore in our house, which means we eat very animal-based. Very seldom do we have plant foods. And if we do, I've even looked at those plant foods from an oxalate perspective, which is a plant anti-nutrient, and also a lectin perspective, which is another plant anti-nutrient, for different reasons. And that's something I'm really studying at the moment.
Yeah.
It's another topic to talk about.
No, that's fine. I did want to ask a little bit. So there's 4 kids, yourself and your husband, and
Correct.
a gaggle of pets and animals. So,
Yes.
yeah,
In my
and
lap.
yeah. So how did this change in eating support the others in the family? Because it's obvious that some needed the change. But what about, there's people listening that they may, they run into roadblocks with their own family, their kids and teenagers, or even their spouse. So,
Yep.
you know, across your family, maybe everyone didn't need an immediate change, but now they have some good benefits. So maybe talk a little bit to those people who say, okay, half my family's in agreement, but we still have 2 outcasts over here that don't want to join. How do I deal with that?
So, well, you think that the rest of the family don't need to change because we look at it from a perspective that she's got type 1 diabetes, we need to cut carbs, her body can't metabolize carbs, end of story. Not really that cut and dry. I realized with all my learning that I started to do, because let's face it, there's not many people talking about type 1 and low carb or carnivore or anything like that. So I had to do my learning from different parameters. So most of my learning came from type 2 diabetes. And then it went down sort of the type 3 diabetes, which is Alzheimer's and dementia. And I realized that cutting all these things out were actually going to help my 2 boys who had learning difficulties, attention things. So I went, oh, well, that's going to help them too. So I started cutting these things. Then my 4th, I was like, well, darling, you're the 4th. You just follow along because that's what the baby does. You follow along. She was only 3. So I guess in a blessing, having Ashley diagnosed when she was 11, then the other children are 9, 7, and I think she was 3. And so I still had a lot of say in what they ate. I did the shopping, so I had control. And that's what I try to get across to parents is that you are the one that has the control. Your health does start in the kitchen. And unfortunately, yes, And excuse my language, it's bloody hard. Your children are addicted to what you were feeding them. They are going to go through withdrawals. They are going to go through addiction and withdrawal symptoms and signs. One of my sons, when we first converted over to very strict low carb, as in almost every meal, he ate bacon and eggs for a month. He is 14, he is still alive, and he is now predominantly carnivore for his brain health. He was getting E's and failing every subject in school. He is now just passed mathematics in his last semester with a C, his own ability, his own focus. So, food is important for every single member of the family, regardless if you have an illness or not.
Yeah, that's a great word. I mean, I'm glad you made the point. You know, when my husband and I started changing how we looked at food and diet, it was in relation to our health. So we needed to make some really fast and hard uh, changes. He was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes in an emergency room. He had no idea he was a diabetic. You know, he had had some surgery, minor surgery, but developed a wild infection, had to go into emerge, and the attending physician said, "Hey, Mr. McCann, your diabetes is really out of control." And he kind of laughed, like my husband, like, "Oh, you must be in the wrong room." And so, no, I'm in the right room, and you're a diabetic, are you? And so his blood sugar was 16.9. It was crazy high. So
Wow.
this is Canadian numbers. So um, well, it was high. I can't I can't,
That's
yeah.
you can't have
Yeah. Anyway, so he clearly needed to make some big changes. He was fortunate that he went to see his doctor, and his doctor agreed to give him that 90 days, that 3-month buffer before he started any form of medication. And Jeff said, "Let me find a way to fix this. You know, obviously it's my diet, and if that's going to help me, I'm going to change it." So he went to the internet. He thought, I got to find a way. And that's how he found Dr. Fung. He found Jason Fung online way back in 2015 and was a patient of Dr. Fung in Scarborough because we lived just an hour from the clinic at the time. Clinic is gone now. But so he made changes, and that immediately made changes have to happen in our household.
Yeah.
Yes, I was the shopper, but he is too, and I'm sure your spouse goes shopping and brings home things that he likes just, as much as the rest of the family. So we all had to have a part in how we were going to support dad. Now, how are we going to support these family members who need our help? So we had to start getting rid of different things, foods, and bad habits. And then 6 months later, literally 6 months later, I was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. That's crazy. I'm on way on the other side of it now. I'm cancer free, which is fantastic. But again, my diet was the key. It was the lock on the door, actually, was the lock. The key was changing my diet and using some intermittent fasting. But taking that to our family, it was one thing for us to be healthy, or it's one thing for you and your husband, or even your dad to be healthy. But we have 7 kids. You have 4 kids. We have 3 grandchildren. So you start to look and you think, okay, it's not good enough that we're healthy because now these kids, they're growing into teenagers. We have adult children, obviously, now because they have kids of their own. But how are we going to make an impact that they aren't where we are at 50?
Yeah.
Because that's the problem. That's where sugar addiction and processed foods are everywhere. Even in our school, we have a school breakfast program where you can go to school early and have breakfast. But when we found out our school was serving grilled cheese sandwiches and chocolate milk, we were like, you can't go there anymore. And our kids, we felt bad because it was a social interaction for our kids. They didn't need to go for breakfast, but it was the social aspect. But making those changes were really important for our family. And you're right, it does make a big difference. Even if today you're 8 years old, obviously you don't have a weight issue or you don't have an insulin resistant issue. But as we keep going, eating this way, which happened to us, we ended up with all of these sicknesses and ailments. And, I deal with a lot of clients who don't, or maybe they aren't ready to own up to that responsibility. And a lot of people don't want to know that they are responsible. And,
Yeah.
I was responsible for where I was with my cancer diagnosis. I'm not saying everybody that has cancer, they're responsible, but my particular situation, it was fully, relying on some bad choices, maybe 10 years prior to the diagnosis. So starting early, cleaning up that pantry and that kitchen is a gift that we can give to our kids. And I think it's really, really important. So I'm glad that you brought that point up.
I want to say to parents, though, have a moment of grieving. You haven't done the wrong thing, but you have the choice to move forward. I know you might sit there and go, "Oh my God, I've been feeding my children the cereal. I've had the fruit juice, and I've put it on the table." And that sense of urgency and panic, man, that overwhelming feeling will come through. And I do find a lot of parents need to just have a moment to realize, okay, yeah, I did that. However, I now can take ownership and responsibility and move my family forward. Have the chance to make changes. But just a moment. And I think when they allow themselves to move through, and for some people it's traumatic because they don't realize that they're poisoning their children. They don't realize that they're bringing all this horrible stuff into their family. I mean, I'm not sure about your labeling system. We have labels and stickers on all our boxes. It's gluten free. It's artificial colorings and this, that, and the bloody other. We got a 5-star health rating, which is just absolutely stupid. My daughter comes home and says, "Mum, my friends have this and it's got 5 stars." And I said, "I'll kick those 5 stars out the door. I don't care.
Yeah.
It's not real fruit juice. I'm not buying it." That's it. End of story. And yeah, they've learnt now when mum says no, mum says no. But it's really interesting. Butter's got a 1-star health rating, and these roll up things that are made on 2% real fruit juice, they've got a 5-star health rating.
Yeah.
That's off big time. But you have the choice to realize and understand that that is not real food for your children. If your children want to roll up, make it yourself with real fruit. And that's what I've said to my children. If mummy can't make it or replicate it, then it is not needed.
That's
End of.
a great strategy and a great tip. And
Yeah.
also, teaching your kids from a young age, or even if you're starting with teenagers, teaching them about labels. And, our kids now, they'll go shopping with me and they'll find things just like what you're saying, and they'll reach them off the shelf and they'll look at them and they'll like, "Oh, this looks interesting." And as soon as they turn it around and start reading it, because they learn by osmosis, and just hearing everything that's going on in my office and my husband's office, um, they look at that label and then they put it back. And I then I ask them, "Why did you put that back?" And they're like, "Mom, you wouldn't want that." And I'm like, "Why wouldn't I want that?" And they're like, "Well, it has, XYZ carbs, and it has high fructose corn syrup." And they're like, "No, no, you don't want it." So, and they're right. But we don't shop those aisles normally, but sometimes they find their way out in the produce section because they know shoppers aren't going in there anymore. But if I can't pick that item up and name what's in it, I don't buy it. It's not real food. Just like you say, if I can't create it and make it at home with real food, then it's off the list. And I think that's a great strategy. You have some great cooking tips. I see them on Instagram. Maybe if you want some followers, you can tell people how to find you on Instagram if you want some more information, or just to follow Tracey. What's your
Yeah.
Instagram handle?
So my Instagram handle is my big fat plate, but I don't tend to post on there as much anymore. I run Low Carb Canberra. Anybody's free to join Low Carb Canberra. I'm a doctor, and we have followers from all over the world. We put on events and things like that. So you're more than welcome. I know it's Canberra based. We talk about restaurants we found and all those things. So when we're all allowed to travel again, you can all come
Yeah.
visit me in
Yeah,
Canberra.
that would be great. And you know what? My niece just married a young guy from Sydney. So they were married here in Canada. That's where I am. And they're on their honeymoon, and I think the end of July they move permanently back to Sydney. So
Because they're down now. Sydney's completely. because it's got the Delta strain.
I
So
know, I know. So we'll see where they end up going, but that's where he lives, so what are you gonna do, right? Yeah,
they
yeah,
can always come to
yeah.
Canberra when they've finished lockdown. But
So
yeah, follow me personally. I add people to my Facebook within reason. I add
yeah,
people. I know that you've come from you, then I'll add them to my personal page because I do. I post very openly and honestly about things that go on in our family, whether it be diabetes, whether it be mental health, whether it be learning, food, whatever it is. And I also try and keep people as motivated and connected and keep going with their journey in
yeah, yeah.
low carb.
Awesome. All great tips and strategies. At the start of this recording, we weren't sure if Tracey would be here for our live Q&A, but we will have a live Q&A following this video, and maybe it'll be a surprise. We'll shut it off. Tracey will be here. We don't know. But on that note, thank you so much, Tracey, for being here with us at the Low Carb Family. We will continue to follow you in your journey, and we wish you all the best. So thank you again for being here.
Thank you. See ya.